Welcome to Election Night Light 2022. My name is Corey Dolgon. I'm a professor at Stonehill College, and I'll be hosting and moderating this august panel this evening, bringing you the returns from today's primary elections. Here with me tonight are Willie Wilson, Jr. and Steve Thomasy, and I will let them say a few words about themselves before we get into what's on the ballot and what hopefully you all have voted for. And then we'll be bringing you the returns throughout the evening, as well as hopefully some very informative banter as we go through tonight's rundown. Willie.
My name is Willie Wilson, Jr., and I am an instructor at the Adult Learning Center. I teach CNA, Certified Nursing Assistants there, as well as ESOL 3A, and I'm adjunct professor at Stonehill College.
And Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Thomasy. I also teach at the Adult Learning Center with Willie. I teach preparation for the citizenship test and naturalization interview. I'm a retired high school history teacher. I'm the chairman of the Ward 3 Democratic City Committee, and I'm kind of a politics junkie.
And both of you, of course, have been not only longtime residents of Brockton, but longtime teachers in Brockton and participants in so many important changes and events here in town. I think that it would probably be good for us to start off, because I think we only have vote totals of 1 or 2 at this point. I think it might be good for us to know kind of what is on the ballot. What have people been looking at and voting on all day?
Right. I can, for people who went to the polls, I'm going to tell you things that you already know. For people who haven't, this is what would have happened this morning or this afternoon or even this evening. You would have gone in, since it was a primary, and picked either a Democratic or a Republican ballot. The people that could be voted for were the same on both, but the parties were selecting their own nominees today. So there were different levels of voting today, even though it was all on the same page. On the federal level, there was only one election, and that was for Massachusetts 8th District. So Stephen Lynch was on the ballot there. He was unopposed. And on the Republican side, there were 2 Republican candidates to get the nomination to oppose Steve Lynch in November. I've been told that one of those 2 men, who I don't know him personally, is the owner of George's Cafe here in Brockton. On the statewide level, these are the campaigns that you've seen advertisements for the last several weeks and have probably been getting phone calls about. The marquee races were for governor. I think that the turnout, and of course for primary elections, turnout is really fairly poor. It didn't help that Maura Healey on the Democratic side was unopposed. Now, if you pulled a ballot today, you might have seen, well, you would have seen that Sonia Chung Diaz's name was still on there. She did not withdraw before her name was on it, so you could have voted for her today, even though she had withdrawn. And then, of course, you have on the Republican side, which I think is much more interesting today, was the person who is going to run against Maura Healey in November. And there was a real distinct choice there philosophically between Jeff Deal, who is the Trump-endorsed candidate. Trump made a television rally for him yesterday, or a videotape rally for him yesterday. And Chris Doty, a man who is just marketing himself as simply a businessman concerned about cost of living and lowering taxes. He is the one that Charlie Baker, for example, would prefer. And then you have the lieutenant governor's race. There were 3 people on the Democratic side. one of whom dropped out just the other day, so there were actually, two people running there. You have the Attorney General, and on the Democratic side, there were two candidates for Attorney General. On the Republican side, there was just one, so that person was unopposed. You had Secretary of State, and that was a pretty hot election on the Democratic side between Bill Galvin, who has been the Secretary of State, I think, 24 years, and a newcomer, a woman who went to Brockton High School and is the president of the Boston area NAACP. This is Tanisha Sullivan. For State Treasurer, Deb Goldberg on the Republican side, on the Democratic side, is unopposed. There's the auditor election, which is also pretty hot, and you've seen a lot of ads on this. Chris Dempsey on the Democratic side is running against Diane DeZoglio, and they've had a lot of ads, and it's been a very hot campaign. The current auditor, Suzanne Bump, is did endorse Chris Dempsey. On the Republican side, that's an interesting one. He's not opposed, but there's a man named Anthony Amore, who you may not have heard of, but he's a favorite of Baker. And when we get to the general election, Baker and his people are going to be arguing that Amore should be overlooking the activities of the Democratic-controlled state legislature, so that he does have a little bit of thing to say there. We have a counselor, governor's council. There's a man named, from our district, a man named Robin Jubenville is the incumbent, and he is unopposed on the Democratic side, and there's no one running on the Republican side. There's a senator in the general court. Now, the term general court refers to the state legislature. It's a vestige of colonial times. And so the senator in general court is currently from the Brockton area, and you could have voted for or against him today, is Michael Brady. He has been a elected official in Brockton for I don't know how long, but he was school committee and then city council, then state rep, and now state senator. Jeff Deal once ran against him and got slaughtered. By the way, Brady killed him in that election. Brady's being challenged by Katrina Huff-Larmond, who is a town councilor in the town of Randolph, all right? And that is a newly configured district. Every 10 years, probably after a census, in the election that's 2 years after the census, there are new districts created, all right? And so Brady's running in a district different than he has before. Then there is the representative in the general court, again, the State House. And this, there are 3 representatives from Brockton, so it depends on where you live, who you might have gotten to vote for today. Michelle Dubois, in a slightly reconfigured district, is the incumbent unopposed. Jerry Cassidy has a reconfigured district. He's unopposed. And there is the newly created district that came into existence when Claire Cronin resigned and became the U.S. ambassador to Ireland. So they weren't stepping on anybody's toes when they made this new district. And that, you had a choice in the Democratic primary between Rita Mendez, city councilor at large, Shirley Azak, who is a city councilor from Ward 7, and his campaign was encouraging you. This is Fred Fontaine, was running a sticker campaign today. So you would have had to either put his sticker on or write him in, and you would have had to write in his correct home address to get that. So I don't know how that's going to work out, but that's a new district there. Then there are the Plymouth County offices, right? There is the Plymouth County Sheriff. There was no Democrat on the ballot. Joe McDonald, who is the current sheriff, was running unopposed in the Republican. There is going to be a very hot race in November between the Democratic nominee, which will be Rahsaan Hall, who is from Brockton, an attorney, civil rights attorney, who will be running against the current district attorney from Plymouth, Timothy Cruz, who's been there, I think, 16 years. So this is going to be a hot race. In the sheriff's race, no, it was Joe McDonald in the sheriff's race. He is unopposed. And county commissioner. On the Democratic side, there was Alex Bezanson and Carlos da Silva. And on the Republican side, there was somebody unopposed who I don't know. So there's also going to be a race there in November. I do want to just say one last thing. I saw a really, I thought, harrowing statistic. Amongst current incumbents in the State House, this is State Senate and State Legislature, State Representatives, only 10% are being opposed in the primary. And in the general election, this is out of 200 members in the State House, only 28%, that's 56 of them out of 200, are going to be opposed in November. So what you have is a lot of people unopposed, which you wonder why that happens. So I think I've covered everything that's was on the ballot today. Thank you.
No, thank you for that very comprehensive, informative overview. I want to point out a few things, and then there are some questions that I want to get to as the night progresses, and one of them has to do with civic engagement in general, particularly voters, but also candidates. You know, what is it about contemporary politics that it's really hard to get people to run for office, particularly, surprisingly, local positions. So some of tonight's elections are really precursors to what's going to happen in November. So primary night, we're looking for, you know, who will be the candidate from the Democratic Party, who will be the candidate from the Republican Party. Some of these are very, very hotly contested. And so, you know, I think as the results come in, we'll really be looking at things like the Attorney General on the Democratic side. We'll be really interested to see Secretary of State on the Democratic side. And certainly in one of the three districts you talked about, we'll be looking for who the state representative candidate would be among Asik, Mendez, and Fontaine. But you know, then there are some more local things here. But I really think that this is a moment where most of what's being discussed are state level issues, and so you know, we want to talk a little bit tonight about how these state issues do affect people in Brockton. And so, Willie, I know that you've been watching politics in Brockton for a long time, and as a historian, you could talk quite intelligently about the time when Brockton was actually run by socialists, which is always my favorite period of Brockton history. But we can save that for a little later if we still don't have any results in. But I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the new changes that are going on that are represented here in the ballot, and what some of those new issues are going to be for people if and when they're elected.
Well, I think this current session that we're going to be entering in, I believe it's September, will be the 193rd session of the General Court. And there are a lot of particular issues that the legislature did not get to when they ended their session, the 192nd session in July. And so a lot of these were, they were on the docket, but they just didn't get to them for various reasons. But, one is the enact driving clean energy and offshore wind. And with that, a lot of language around climate change and so forth. Another one is an act to end housing discrimination in the Commonwealth, and this deals with rent control and some of the other issues. And so there is just specific acts, and then issues that are connected to those acts are with that same legislation. For those who are unfamiliar how that works, there might be 3 or 4 different acts. And then what happens is they'll go to committee, and then they'll actually combine, take the salient points and so forth, and then the House will pass it. It'll go to the Senate will pass it, and then if there are inconsistencies or differences, they'll work that out in a conference committee. And so I mentioned the clean energy and then the housing. And these are specific for us in the city of Brockton. And then there's an act relative to immediate COVID-19 recovery needs. And that's another one in terms of preparing, not only making sure that the citizens, we're a city of 105,000 plus, that enough money and structures are in place to continue to meet the needs of COVID-19, and also to prepare us to make sure that this infrastructure is in place for something that might come down the line. So those are 3 different things, and then we have several other issues. There's the big the hospital. I don't know if the Hospital Reform Act that Governor Baker didn't get to, the legislature didn't address, and then there's a big key piece in that, the mental health. For those of you who are familiar with the ABC Act, mental health initiatives, and then there's tax reform, and then we passed the college sports betting and the other, But what happens is, what people don't realize is that. A lot of the mechanics have to be put in place, so they have a committee, and all these things, take time. And I'm trying to think, the other thing that's coming up, the Economic Development Bill, which the House and Senate did pass, but now the details have to be worked out. And I always like that analogy of a sausage, in terms of sausage making. But these are all important. And then there's a Safe Students Bill Act, which the Senate passed. I'm not sure if the House passed it or not, but then this deals, I think this was a response to the incident in Uvalde, Texas. And so this one deals to make sure that enough things are done in terms of schools being safe and ready and so forth. ALICE training and all of that, which most school districts do, but it's just to reinforce it's asking for a second look, a second review to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in terms of all the safety initiatives. And so, what's going to happen is we have these new people coming in, and usually every year after the new politicians are elected and so forth, and Harvard University has they have a week course and so forth, just to orientate,
Right.
In terms of, now that you've been elected, now these are the things, how to do things, steps, and so there's a lot. Now, what has to happen is you have these state agenda items, and then how do they mesh and fit into the needs and the desires of the citizens of Brockton? And so that's what has to happen.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, we'll look at numbers, but the sort of widespread disillusionment with government is sometimes caused by people just being turned off by infighting, but we don't really have that in Massachusetts. A lot of the disillusionment, I think, comes from the fact that nothing seems to get done. I mean, the sports betting is just an example. I will I've never bet on any sports and won't do that.
I'll bet
But
you might someday.
But the fact is that Baker wanted it. Everybody, people widely wanted it. They kept on saying that other states around us have it. Both leaders of both houses, Spilka and Mariano, said that they wanted it. And it finally got done, but they were fighting over the compromise about whether or not you could vote on college sports, right? And any high school class could have made the exact same choice that they made, is you can't until you get to the playoffs. You can't bet on Massachusetts colleges. Really? That's what held it up? So now we do have it, but as you're saying, because of the implementation problems, people who want to bet on the Patriots can't, because by the time they create the system that actually goes into effect, the football season will be over. And so you look at something like that, even where everybody wanted it,
Yeah.
Why couldn't you get it? And they have their own little fiefdoms. Each of the committees, and particularly the leadership, has those fiefdom. And there are no term limits. Back in the days, this is sort of old stuff, but back in the days of George Kavarian, you might have remembered the reforms, and they put term limits on it. And Mariano, who's currently the chief in the House, he was one of the leaders of calling for, at the time of Kavarian, calling for the term limits on leadership positions. But then he also then voted to eliminate it, and now he's basically in there like, I don't know, Xi Jinping or Putin until there's no way to, so they kind of, protect their little turf. And so people who are watching this all over the state, people who can't name their state senator. I mean, all of us know Mike Brady personally, or Rita or Jerry Cassidy, but that's only because we're really into the politics. If you walk around and, in our last city election, there was the final election, 19% turnout, and you can actually talk to the mayor. I mean, you can walk up and talk to him, and even in that circumstance, people, don't come out. If you walk on the streets and ask people just randomly, who's your city councilor? They don't know, and it's somebody who might live down the street from them. So it's, I don't know, breaking through that is I'm not really sure. I mean, I've done a lot of door to door, and it's like, I don't know, maybe I'll go to vote. Now, the reason that the incumbents win all the time is that it's name recognition. The people who always voted since back in the day, they voted for Mike Brady. This is not an attack on Mike Brady, but I'm just saying the people who voted for him back when he ran for school committee and knew him as a young person, voted for him again for, a city councilor and then state rep and now state senate. They go in, if they go, they recognize his name. He's around everywhere. I mean, he's doing what you should be doing, being available to the people that elected you, and you see him. And who's his opponent? Do you know her? I mean, I've met her a couple times, but only because I'm like a junkie on this.
But let me take this out and then come back in. On the one hand, to me, you've just pointed out exactly what is wrong with democracy. From the local to the national, the idea is that we give every individual of voting age and of citizenship the right to participate in the governing of their communities and their states and their countries. And that's really, kind of one basic principle of democracy. But what we've done is we've then operationalized democracy to turn it into these two parties, this electoral system, right? And as soon as it becomes two candidates, right? So much has been taken out of the lifeblood of that neighborhood, that community, that feeling that you're participating in something that makes a difference around you. So who chooses these candidates? Well, the parties choose the candidates, and we talked about you going to the Democratic convention. The idea that you actually were able to vote for who you wanted to be one of those candidates is actually puts you in a very elite group. Not that you're elite necessarily, but the idea that you knew and had participated and knew who people were, that democracy has become a process by which a very few people participate to any great degree, and 19% are only voting, and that's the most minimal part of that democracy. So now to kind of bring it back, from that theoretical idea, it does seem to me that we have a two-way problem, and this is local and statewide, and that is that on the one hand, we don't have enough people participating, and they don't know enough, and we're not doing a job as a society to educate people enough and make it easy enough to vote. We're starting to get there, early voting and things of that sort. But on the other side, when not enough people are voting, there's actually no benefit to get things done. In other words, for people to create those fiefdoms you talked about, they're actually almost better off not doing too much, because that keeps them on this name-only popularity, who's going to vote, how can I get all those people out to vote? And instead of running on platforms and success, people need more money, because all they're really trying to do is become popular and become famous. And so one handicap from people running for some offices, they can't afford it. We talked about earlier today about how much people were spending simply on the, I forget, was it the Secretary of State or?
Oh, well, I mean,
people are spending the kind of money people used to spend to run for senator.
right, there's no limitation on how much of your own money you can spend. You just have to make in the state of Massachusetts, a declaration of the maximum of your own money that you're willing to spend. So the case in point, and everybody's making a big deal about this, is Shannon Liss-Riordan, who declared that she was willing to go as far as spending $12 million of her own money to be Attorney General of Massachusetts, and she actually came in at $9.3 million. Now,
it's a budget. That's a budget.
She's
candidacy.
arguing, of course, the flip side. Her argument is that she's not beholden to anybody. Contributors, she doesn't owe them anything because she hasn't taken any money. Now, the other candidate who stayed in the race, Andrea Campbell, the accusation there is that her money's coming from super PACs, and it's been pointed out that the super PACs are nationwide, and the super PACs that have been contributing to her also contribute to Republican candidates in other states, because they have their money in essentially every pot, so that anybody who's elected, they have some connection to it, But she didn't have $12 million personally, how did she run against it?
I want to bring it back to something that Corey mentioned. Now, when I taught U.S. history and African American history at the high school, I actually was able to, we had voter registration. So students who were 18 could register. So what can we do to engage more younger people in the process? Because what you said is, it's been processed and so forth, and a lot of people can't see the connection. So what can we do to reinvigorate the institution so more people will become involved?
Sure. Well, I think that's a question, that if we answer tonight, we'll be getting phone calls from both parties to be consultants, and that's where the real money is. Being a consultant.
I think. I was telling you today, I was reading an article about, when we were talking this morning, just recently reading an article about the disillusionment of young voters. But the thing is that it looks as though problems are overwhelming. So in theory, the young voters, I mean, there's not much on climate change that was affected by today's election. But it is an issue in the State House how to, send money to climate change positive activities. But, the climate change, so if you're 25, you'll be around, be 50 years before, I hate to bring this up, that you're, my age. And then, what kind of place are you going to have? Because the climate change, the first climate change international convention was in Rio in 1992. And so, what has been done really toward that, And so, does it look like you're doomed?
Right.
And if you feel like you're doomed, maybe you do something else besides go to vote and get frustrated that the people that got elected are a bunch of old people again. I mean, what do you think? I mean, I look at this, and both of the guys who ran for president last time were both older than me, and I'm an old guy. I mean, what is that? You know?
I think you're right, and I would say that we could say, well, Obama preceded Trump and seemed to get out more youth vote than before, but it was still very low. And I think that we are heading towards a break. I have a big question to ask you, Willie, and I'll ask it to you now before the break so you can think about it while we hear a few words from some very important people around town who are doing important things. But my question is, if you, both of you, were incredible teachers and you managed to figure out ways to educate youth, can we take some of those same principles to start thinking about how do we engage students not in their textbook, but in their community? And if they're engaged in their community, will they become more engaged in the political realm? So that's my question. But we're going to move to a break, and we'll be back in a few minutes, and hopefully we'll have some numbers, so it's not just us talking for the rest of the evening.
This is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making. This is history in the making. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Feel like sun on my skin. This is love. I know it is. I know it sounds super cliche, but you make me feel some type of way. This is falling, falling in love.
Why aren't you voting?
When you vote, you can do something about everything. At voteforyourlife.com, it's never been faster or easier to make a plan to vote.
Time is running out, but you still have the chance to use your power.
Check your registration and make sure your address on file is correct.
Find your state's deadlines, learn about local candidates, and request a ballot.
You'll be able to see where candidates stand on issues you care about.
Order a ballot request form to be mailed to you with prepaid postage,
allowing you to vote early, easily, and safely.
Make a plan to vote early by finding your nearest ballot drop box, in-person polling place, or local mailbox.
And this is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Welcome back to Election Night. election night light, rather, excuse me. This is primary day in Massachusetts, and my name is Corey Dolgon. I'm a professor at Stonehill College, and I'm moderating tonight's event. We will be receiving results from the primary elections and bringing them to you, and hopefully we'll have something interesting and enlightening to report, but also to tell you about what we think these numbers actually mean. One of the interesting things about the primaries and kind of what we've been talking about as far as engagement from people in our communities and in our society at large is how few people vote, but also how few people run for so many important offices. And maybe the fact that the cost of running, but the inability for most people in communities and neighborhoods to think that they have a vested interest in what's going on at the State House, what's going on even at City Hall. And how can we kind of think about changing the dynamics of democracy itself to be a much more inclusive and inviting and inspiring process. And so, you know, I look at the ballot today, for instance, and you know, you're right, we see some of the same familiar faces. We see someone like Maura Healey, who has been engaged on the state level for many, many years. We see someone like Mike Brady, who's been engaged on a local level for many, many, many years. And so we see so many of the same names, and also I would say a very similar kind of profile for these candidates. And I guess one of the questions I have, and Steve, maybe you can start with this, is what do you think we could do to change politics to be something that people in general feel they're engaged with and it's meaningful to them?
I don't know. You can increase turnout by making it more entertaining.
Unlike this evening.
And entertaining, like Donald Trump was first known by being on the television show The Apprentice. Even though he had been, you know, a tycoon for years, he was mostly limited to New York and New Jersey. And so Trump Tower, if you're from New York, I know you're from New York too, you know, he was known there, but he was on that Apprentice show, so he was a television star.
Sure.
And he was entertaining. And actually, before he became president, he really didn't have any policies except for saying that Mexicans were rapists and that sort of thing. But he was an entertainer. And so there's got to be more of that. Now, if you take a look at the candidates who are running today, most of them are trying to go the other way, right, and to not stand out too much. Jeff Deal is an exception to this. Right. But if you take a look, some people will not be happy if I say this, but if you take a look at Maura Healey, who had been, when she first came in, seen as a reformer. This is very interesting. I just want to point this out. Yeah. Sonia Chang Diaz has 196 votes there. She dropped out of the race in June.
Right.
Now, why did 196 people vote for her today? It's likely that they knew she dropped, or it could be just anti-Maura Healey, but she hasn't been in the race since June.
That's right. No, that's right.
And I was curious how many people she's going to get. And Maura Healey, if you've been watching her campaign, oh, that's just from Ward 2. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, this is only local.
Yes, these are, I think we're going to see mostly the local returns
ones,
on these statewide races.
Right.
But I think the point that you're making is still really interesting, right? Because, you know, so until we met this morning, I'm a professor at Stonehill College of sociology. I listen to NPR every morning. I read the Boston Globes, the New York Times, depending on how often I'm in the bathroom. So, you know, I mean, I tend to know a lot about a lot of things, and I know nothing about the statewide primaries until I knew I was going to be here. And so I hadn't even heard that Maura Healey had an opponent. And then when I did find out today, I had actually already voted for Sonia Chang Diaz. So I actually think, there are a lot of people who are big fans of hers, who actually wanted to support her and didn't know, in fact, that she had dropped out. Yeah. Now we have a couple of other numbers. They're very small, but I know you're going to be very interested in this.
This is, very interesting. All the polls, like you hear about the Merrimack poll and the one from Suffolk, and these things are all saying that Deal is going to win here because this is a Republican primary.
Right.
And
also because he has refused to debate Doughty.
Doughty, right.
And because he knew his numbers were high, and he felt that if he debated him, he would have lost. So, and it would have boasted.
That's right. And think about, by
Doughty's-
the way, think about that dynamic, because we were just talking about it, right? Which is, why doesn't anything happen in government? To the degree that we know everybody's talking about all these issues, but it takes so much just to get something done that everyone agrees on. Here we are. We're talking about a debate for an office, which we've come to believe is one of the few times that we really get information. We can see candidates talking back and forth. And if somebody thinks they're ahead in the poll, it's to their advantage not to debate, not to talk about the issue. So again, I think we're back to the idea that it's actually in many, not just candidates, but in fact elected officials' best interests as far as getting elected to not do something.
Not debate. Could you, again, re-ask that question? I want to address the question before we had the break.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, let's get a few numbers in, and then
Okay.
we'll come back to that question. So this is Lieutenant Governor.
Right. Now, Kim Driscoll has been endorsed by Maura Healey. Maura Healey wants her to be and she's the mayor of Salem. And by all accounts, truth be told, I voted for Lesser because I think Western Mass is unrepresented.
And he's from Western Mass.
Right. And that's been his big thing, that those people, and I taught at Springfield Cathedral in the 70s, and I lived out in Western Mass a little bit of time, and Boston was the other side of the world. Yeah. And so he's trying to make that point about that, but she's a mayor of a fairly important city.
Sure.
And she's been arguing that bringing home the bacon to municipalities is what her skill is going to be. Right. She can go to the state legislature and explain all this sort of thing. So she does have that going for,
sure.
But then the other thing that he pointed out, and I did vote for him as well,
right.
is, again, like Andrea Campbell, in terms of the PACs that support her, they support her. And so Kim Driscoll did receive money from, a Republican real estate, tycoon. So in other words,
right.
when you're looking at the money, so, you have all these little nuances and,
That's right. And those are super PACs that contribute to candidates from all parties.
All parties.
Right.
Now, looking at the numbers for the Republican lieutenant governor, I'm imagining there wasn't a lot of PAC money coming in.
This is interesting too, because even though lieutenant governors and governors run separately in the primary,
right.
they run as a ticket in the thing. So Kate Campanelli has been campaigning with Doughty, and Leah Allen has been campaigning with Deal. They show up in the same place, and they indicate that they want to be the running mate. So pretty much if you vote for Deal, you're going to vote for her,
right.
and if you vote for Doughty, you're going to vote for, although she got, Campanelli got more votes than Doughty.
Doughty, right. In Brockton, don't forget, Campanelli is a big name, so.
Oh, maybe.
It's spelled differently.
Right. No, but maybe that's the case. But the fact is that how many people could tell you anything about either of these people? Now, again, because I am like a junkie here. I could tell you a little bit about each one of them,
Right.
but it's not really relevant. The odd thing is that you can have a lieutenant governor and a governor candidate who actually don't get along or don't like
sure.
each other the way this is set up, because they in the primaries they run separately. They do run as a pair, but
Sure.
way back in the day with Ed King and Tommy O'Neill,
Right.
they were
not.
governor and lieutenant governor, but they weren't simpatico with
Not
each
at
other.
all. Now, these are some really interesting,
Yeah.
and this is a hot race in the Attorney General race. It looks like Andrea Campbell is off to a good start, at least here in Brockton.
Yeah, and now Palfrey here, I know Palfrey, excuse me,
Yeah, he
not
pulled
Paltry, I'm
That
sorry.
was a Freudian slip. but
Yeah,
we'll-
Yeah. I like chicken too.
he only pulled out after he pulled out the second day of the voting at the mall.
That's right.
So it was really late. I know a couple people who are mad because they voted for him. If you knew, and his problem was that he was polling at 10%, but a week earlier he was probably polling at 10%. So even though I liked him, I voted for him at the convention, and I just liked everything. Now it's interesting. He came in, and after slamming Andrea Campbell in debates for her PAC money, he also said that she was spending and complaining about how she got her money, because she's basically personal injury lawyer, and so she got a
This is
percentage.
Shannon,
Shannon
Liss-Riordan.
Liss-Riordan, she got a percentage of it. So there's been criticisms that she's got a really amazing. I mean, I don't know how much money she has, but if she could spend. So anyway, there is
Well, if she could
something there.
spend 12.3 million of her own money. That's
Right,
a lot of money.
or 9.3,
But,
yeah.
but that is, and obviously James McMahon is running unopposed as a Republican.
Right, and he'll run against and he won't win in this
Right.
case, right? But I suspect that the 74 votes that he got were, straight ticket voting.
Voting for
People who
Republicans.
vote for all the Republicans, kind of thing like that. They go right down. Actually, in the primary, there's no way to split ticket vote.
That's right.
If you take this one, you can only vote for
Vote, that's right.
Republicans, and if you take this,
That's right.
you can split ticket
That's
vote
right.
in November.
In the
Yeah.
general.
For the
Yeah.
for the civics interested folks, I mean, this is very different. So different states have different formats for such things. In some states, you can cross over from Democrat to Republican. In some states, the lieutenant governor and governor run separately, and so you actually can have a governor and a lieutenant governor from different parties.
Right.
So it is interesting to me that Massachusetts tries to keep everything very neat and keep everything very separate. And I think, that's why I think we end up sometimes with Republican governors in a state that's very, very Democratic.
Well, the argument there is that they will be able, as a check on the all-Democrat state legislature. I do want to say that there are a couple states that have different kind of primaries than we
Right.
have here. They have all-comer primaries. So Washington and California are good examples.
Right.
So let me just give you one example. Kamala Harris, how did she get to be she was California senator before she was picked to be that thing. She had been the Attorney General of California. Then they had an all-comers primary, and there were 28 candidates. And so in California, when you run in a single primary for governor or any of these statewide offices. There were 28 candidates. You had a choice. You could identify yourself by party, and there were a bunch of Democrats, some Republicans, or Green Party, and other odd name parties, or you could choose to not identify yourself. The top two vote getters then went into the final, and it was so in the initial one, unless somebody got a majority, but with
Right.
28,
Yeah,
nobody's going to
nobody's
get a
gonna get over
majority that
50%.
first time, so she didn't. Then she was one of the top two. The other one was one of the Dolores sisters, who's a congresswoman. There's two of them that are congresswomen from California, and then in a two-person.
Right.
Now, if you say, well, that sounds pretty radical, we've always done it this way, think about, that's exactly what we do on our city elections.
that's right.
We have all-comer primaries that are called nonpartisan, but it's anybody, and you don't identify yourself by party in it, and the top two. So it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, and then the top two are in the general election. I would advocate that for
For a state,
our
right.
state or
Yeah.
any state.
We had a couple of numbers, and I want to, if we can go back, because we had some of the Secretary of State numbers, and I thought that the Democratic primary for Secretary of State looked very close.
Yeah.
Here in Brockton, at least. Bill Galvin, we were kidding today, that he was actually the first Secretary of State here in Massachusetts in 1785. But seriously, he's been Secretary of State for I think 16 or 18 years.
24.
24 years.
24
so
years.
even before I was born. And Tanisha Sullivan is maybe one of the first Democrats in a primary to really give him a race.
Well, we are looking at
Still
Brockton.
Ward 2.
Yes,
and
that's
we're
right.
only looking at
Well,
Ward 2.
I'm getting excited.
No, but
I'm getting excited.
she has been around campaigning here,
right.
and since she went to high school
from here.
here,
Yep.
she has a lot of friends.
Right.
So
So you don't think
you
as
may-
Ward
you
2
may
goes,
have-
so goes Massachusetts?
But I mean, if possible, and I've seen this for other elections, if you look at West Bridgewater's voting, you would think that you're in two different states, even though, I live in the south side, so I can drive to West Bridgewater in 6 minutes or something,
Yeah.
and you cross the line and you could be somewhere else.
Well, you think that's something, try driving to Middleborough. You'll feel
Oh, right.
you feel like you're in the midst of a massive red zone.
No, my wife and I drive to Plymouth because there's a movie house at the Plymouth plantation that we like to go to, and it's right in the plantation, in the museum thing, and it's cheap for seniors and this sort of thing, under $10. Anyway, but we drive through Carver. And, just on 44, and you don't actually see Carver, and I think, I'm scared. I don't want to break down here. Because if you live in a city, it's like the countryside has,
They have different views.
Yeah,
Different
yeah.
views.
Now I'm wondering, did we get some numbers for some of the other down ballot elections? No. So okay.
So now let's go back to.
Yeah. So let's go back, Willie. One of the themes for tonight clearly is going to be the whole kind of idea of democracy and how we get people more engaged. And in particular, I wanted to hear from you and then Steve, if in fact youth are the lowest number of folks voting, with the exception perhaps of the deceased, right? We talk a lot about how do we inspire the young people to vote, but you all have been in the business of inspiring young people for decades. And so have you thought about any ways that we might in fact get youth inspired to participate in a democracy as opposed to read a textbook?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things, and both Steve and I have taught U.S. History 1 and 2, I taught the city. One of the things that I realize, you have to, within the unit, you really have to have a component of activism. You have to teach our students, you have to teach them how to be activists. And I think that's a critical part of the curriculum that's not in, and one of the ways of doing that is through, in the old days, we had Cub Scouts and Eagle Scouts, and we did projects for the local community or a church or something. But again, one of the things I really enjoyed when I traveled in Africa and Europe, the idea, the community-based learning, which like they had at Stonehill, where students at high school, you're involved in the community, so that you have some projects where students can kind of get involved and understand and see for themselves how this whole this whole thing, this experiment of democracy works on the local level. And Tip O'Neill once said that he got it from somebody else that, all politics are local. But what happens is young people have to see, and it has to be demonstrated before them, and they have to be involved in something that makes their community better. And I think where we have failed in general as educators is the activism piece was missing.
Yeah.
And that's something that I include now in anything.
Well, speaking of all politics being local, we do have some more numbers coming in. And now this is obviously Ward 2 and a new ward, Ward 1. And so we see Maura Healy
Ward 1
coming up.
traditionally, you live in Ward 1?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, traditionally has the highest voting numbers in the city. And like everywhere else, voting numbers are relative to, oh, this is cumulative.
Yeah.
Okay, but still, it's often relative to affluence. People who feel, this is the old stake in society theory, the idea, I mean, originally in in the early United States, you had to pay a certain amount of property tax to be eligible to vote, because the founding fathers believed that you had to have a stake in your society. If you're transient, maybe you shouldn't vote because you don't have a stake in it. So generally, people who are more affluent have more resources that they're trying to protect.
Sure.
You
And I think we see, in some ways, that same thing for the Republican governor, where it looks like, at least locally, Deal is winning 2-1 over Dowdy. I think we've talked about that briefly, but if in fact the Trump factor is not just about Trump, but it's also about how one thinks about politics, Jeff Deal certainly is going to ride that coattail, both because of the MAGA movement as much as Trump's endorsement. So we'll see that maybe play out throughout the evening, certainly here in Brockton. And my guess is that that's going to be true throughout the state.
Thing about the youth thing, I was trying to think of an example. People have to get outraged these days in order to be really motivated to go out to vote. So climate change is happening sort of even slowly, right? So it doesn't like spur outrage. Even big hurricanes or power shutdowns or something can be explained away by something or other. The the narrative now is that the abortion decision by the Supreme Court has animated a lot of the youth voters, and you could see it in some
Every
other
poll.
states.
Every polls, too.
Kansas
But
was
I
the
mean,
big-
this is an example of outrage. This is a clear decision that says to young women that this isn't your choice. I mean, this is literal. This isn't just rhetorical. This is not your choice. State actors can make this really essential choice, right? And it was a radical decision, that Dobbs decision, just to be in the weeds. It was a decision about whether Mississippi's rule of a 15-month
week,
15 weeks, excuse me, ban, after 15 weeks. And the Supreme Court, which actually fits within Roe's trimester thing, the Supreme Court decided to just ignore that and go to, essentially allowing total bans. Now, if that's not going to outrage you, but the fact is that you have to get, to motivate people, now you have to get them angry. And a society that's primarily motivated by anger is a little scary, but it's not just here. There's, around the world. Yeah.
But it is slightly interesting because, maybe we have the proverbial angel and devil, but Willie's suggesting activism. Willie's suggesting there might be a positive pathway to engagement, and you're suggesting, well, what really engages people is getting angry. And so we're going to head towards a break again, and I think we'll have, again, some more important information to send to people, aside from the important information that we've been giving. But maybe when we come back, aside from having more and more numbers as we go through the next hour, we'll be able to solve the proverbial angel versus devil problem. And we'll be right back.
This is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making. This is history in the making. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Feel like sun on my skin. This is love. I know it is. I know it sounds super cliche, but you make me feel some type of way. This is falling, falling in love.
Why aren't you voting?
When you vote, you can do something about everything. At voteforyourlife.com, it's never been faster or easier to make a plan to vote.
Time is running out, but you still have the chance to use your power.
Check your registration and make sure your address on file is correct.
Find your state's deadlines, learn about local candidates, and request a ballot.
You'll be able to see where candidates stand on issues you care about.
Order a ballot request form to be mailed to you with prepaid postage,
allowing you to vote early, easily, and safely.
Make a plan to vote early by finding your nearest ballot drop box, in-person polling place, or local mailbox.
And this is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
This is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making. This is history in the making. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Feel like sun on my skin. This is love. I know it is. I know it sounds super cliche, but you make me feel some type of way. This is falling, falling in love.
Why aren't you voting?
When you vote, you can do something about everything. At voteforyourlife.com, it's never been faster or easier to make a plan to vote.
Time is running out, but you still have the chance to use your power.
Check your registration and make sure your address on file is correct.
Find your state's deadlines, learn about local candidates, and request a ballot.
You'll be able to see where candidates stand on issues you care about.
Order a ballot request form to be mailed to you with prepaid postage,
allowing you to vote early, easily, and safely.
Make a plan to vote early by finding your nearest ballot drop box, in-person polling place, or local mailbox.
And this is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Welcome back to election night coverage here on primary day in Massachusetts. My name is Corey Dolgon, and I'm a professor of sociology at Stonehill College. I'm here with Willie Wilson Jr. and Steve Thomasy. I keep saying Thomasy, and I know it's Thomasy. I'm going to get that right before we're done. We are very excited because we're going to have a lot more numbers coming in, although listening to Willie and Steve has been certainly fascinating for me. You know, one of the things that we continue to kind of examine throughout the evening is, in fact, why, when we talk about our democracy, we seem to be recognizing now there's a crisis. And of course, President Biden has been warning us of this crisis in democracy because of the rise of fascism, et cetera. But I think, you know, the crisis in democracy is not new. And so we're going to be returning to that discussion as we go forward. But here we have some new lieutenant governor numbers, and these are the cumulative numbers from wards 1, 2, and I'm not sure which wards are now coming in. They're pouring in now here in Brockton like rain. And it looks like Kim Driscoll is certainly opening up a lead, but I'm just looking, you know, Eric Lesser seemed to be the lesser known representing Western Massachusetts, but he's not doing as badly as people may have thought.
Now, it's interesting here that the three of them, the two that are not winning, even if they're combined numbers,
right.
Kim Driscoll would still be ahead. But when, you know, people were using terms like progressive or moderate,
Right.
which are the two terms, Kim Driscoll described as the moderate, and the other two were described as progressive. So they're essentially splitting that vote.
Progressive vote, that's right.
Quentin Palfrey did drop out for that purpose,
Right.
Because although all three of them in that race were
Were
Now, what
progressive,
about,
it's hard.
Tammy? Is she still in the race?
Yeah, she has not dropped out.
No.
In fact, at the convention, I cast my vote for her. And, you know, we had the Democratic caucuses at the high school back in February. And if people have never gone to the caucuses, they're so interesting. You just have to be a registered Democrat, and you may not even think about it. But it's way back in February. Every one of these candidates actually came.
That's right.
And I'm moderating a caucus for Ward 3 in some room in Brockton High that has like a sort of step seats, a lecture room.
Yeah.
And Billy Galvin walks in, you know,
Right.
and he's like like we were saying today, he looks like the Count, or what did you say?
Well, I'm gonna.
He looks-
We'll get back to that.
But anyway,
I don't want to
no.
get in too much trouble tonight. But I do want to point out.
He actually came in, every one of these people. So I met these people
Right.
in Brockton High School way back in February.
Right.
And this is like participatory, if you actually shake some hands and
Yeah,
that sort
yeah.
of thing, that most people didn't get to do.
So I think here we see Andrea Campbell with a sizable lead over Riordan and Palfrey, still getting some votes from folks who either are big Palfrey fans or they didn't know that he dropped out. But I have a feeling that especially here in Brockton, we're going to see numbers like this for Andrea Campbell, and my guess is that she's counting on a city like Brockton for a big lead going into some of the other more conservative places around the state. And again, James McMahon's running not only unopposed, but probably unelectable as well for Attorney General in a state that's as overwhelmingly Democratic as we are. Now, I'm really fascinated to see what happens, but I think Galvin's already opening up a big lead here in Tanisha Sullivan's hometown. So I don't know that bodes very well statewide.
You know, during this campaign, I argue all the time that there should be automatically term limits, and the maximum you could set with term limits, but there should be there, and he should not be there just because he's been term limited out. But during the campaign, the debates, it's very hard to point to anything that Galvin has done wrong.
Right.
And he has shepherded in a much wider availability of voting. He does keep track of spending by corporations and stuff, so he really monitors a lot of election stuff.
Sure.
So that in the debates, Tanisha Sullivan, she was really searching around for something
What's the
to
issue?
attack
Yeah,
him
yeah,
with.
yeah.
And she pointed to a vote that he took on abortion in the 1970s when he was a state rep from Brighton.
Yeah.
And it's like, the people's opinions on abortion have shifted.
Right.
Sure.
That was like a 1979 vote. And so it was really hard to do that.
Yeah.
Here we go.
This is a big one
Yeah.
for state auditor.
Yeah.
This it's a decent margin, but not insurmountable here in Brockton. I do wonder. You all have a lot more knowledge about this than I do because I haven't been following Brockton politics for as long. What does Brockton mean statewide? As people are getting more and more votes here for these statewide elections, we don't have the local election results in just yet. Do people look at Brockton and say, well, as goes Brockton, so goes Worcester? Or, is there...
Well, you have those 39, there are 351 cities and towns, and we have 39 cities, actual cities. But when I was looking at that, people will look, if they don't know the candidates, in terms of who is supporting them. So, like, for example, Mayor Wu and Senator Warren, they'll support and people who like them or support them will say, well, I'm going with that candidate. So, but the other thing, it breaks down, getting back to the 39 cities, so you're thinking about the issues for cities in the Commonwealth. These former industrial towns that hit hard times and now are trying to, readjust to the 21st century for their communities, their various communities, the current immigration influx, and so that they're looking at some of the issues, and so that's what they're matching. Will this candidate deliver? And so and when you look at who is supporting who, whether it's Ayanna Pressley or whatever, they make that association, and because they don't know, and then they go with that candidate. So you're seeing a lot of that, and that's where the power of those commercials come in.
Sure.
The TV ads.
But I can't recall. These two candidates, Dempsey and DeZoglio, you haven't seen. I think they've had a commercial just in the last couple of days.
They've had a couple, but here's one of the things.
But it hasn't been that
Well,
tidal wave
but
of
here's
commercials.
the other thing. Like Dempsey's, both of his parents were public school teachers.
Right.
And so, like, again, if you're coming from a blue collar ethos and you're working class, or his dad worked as a construction worker, whatever, so people are making associations. So I thought that was very effective when and that's what people will say. He was raised, and so you're thinking that
how many voters actually know that stuff? Dempsey, the one thing that he talked about over and over was he was the leader of the committee that killed the Boston Olympics, right? And he talks about how they had very little money, and the people trying to get in the Boston Olympics, the big developers and stuff, had massive amounts of money, and so he essentially, engaged in slaying the dragon. And his background actually is involved with accounting.
Right.
Right. In terms, like, again, you know, if you're walking around and asking people who your city councilor is, what does Diane DeZoglio do for a living right now? I mean, I know, but that, you know, so I'm wondering.
Yeah, but now
how
I'm
people
interested.
Yeah, but what?
What is
no,
it?
What
What does she do?
Well, she is a state senator now.
Oh, okay.
She's a state senator now, and, you know, so I've listened to her. She gave a great speech at the convention. I do want to say this. She gave a real barn burner of a speech, and even though I voted for Dempsey today, I actually voted for her
At the convention.
convention because I didn't
Because of the
really,
speech.
I didn't really know either one of them at all.
But the speech moved you.
Yeah, it did. But since then, I've been looking at as many details as I can find, and that it switched my build, because it seemed
Right.
like what he was talking about was actually activities that the auditor
would do.
would actually be involved in,
Yeah.
as opposed to, I mean, she talked a lot about reforming the state senate. She had been there for a while, got nothing done there, and all this sort of thing, which I agreed with 100%.
Right.
But that's not what the auditor
Right.
does.
So while we wait for a few more numbers, let me pull back a second. You were moved by her speech. Did it make you angry or did it inspire you?
Well, you know, I mean, I went in there and wasn't really,
You were a blank slate.
yeah, kind of. You know, I didn't love or hate any of the Democratic candidates. And so I watched them and I was influenced because right after the speeches, then you vote.
Right.
Right, and it was weird. I mean, you guys weren't there, but we had to vote on our phones. And Willie will tell you, the phone and me are not the closest friends.
Right.
And it was
but
like,
this may be the future.
yeah,
right?
well,
This may be the
but
future.
it was a hybrid thing. People at home, it was really kind of a mess.
because you could watch it online.
You could, well,
and-
yeah, if you were a delegate and you could do that, and I hope they don't go back to it. So we were in the Worcester. It's not
Central.
called the Central. Is it still called the Central?
Central.
Whatever it is, yeah. And there were only 2,600 actual live bodies in the place. And sometimes we go to those and they're pretty full.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit eerie. And anyway, so the people got up and spoke and they gave speeches. I know I was utterly unimpressed with Maura Healey's, and Sonia Chang Diaz came out and also gave a barn burner. And Maura Healey did not, I mean, I know Sonia Chang Diaz dropped out, but she didn't agree to any debates with Sonia
Again,
Chang
she
Diaz.
had no reason
but
to.
I remember when Maura Healey was first running for Attorney General, and she was not the favorite. It was against Warren Tolman,
Yeah.
right? Warren
Oh,
Tolman,
sure.
Steve Tolman's a union head and stuff. Warren Tolman from Watertown. I attended a debate that was at the, what's our museum? Fuller.
Yeah.
Art Museum up there, where she was, and she was like totally the underdog. And had she not been in debates,
Sure.
a whole bunch of them around the state with Tolman, she was just like some young woman that
Now,
nobody
see,
heard
I
of.
remember she came and she did presentations at the Adult Learning Center this year.
Oh,
for-
this year
for
she did, yeah.
classes. And but the issues, you know, rent control, you know, visas, all the, you know, and so she could speak to many issues. The other thing, you look at her record
Yeah.
as Attorney General,
sure.
and you will have to, you know, bar none. And I'm hearing this from, you know, people from other states too. You know, outstanding.
No, that's right. But I think, but there's a different principle, and we see Stephen Lynch, who does look a bit like the Montgomery Burns of contemporary politics. He's running unopposed for now, and will cruise to
And he's
the November election.
Right, no doubt in that election.
Now here we have some local
Now, these two
numbers.
men, the winner of this Republican primary, will run against Steve Lynch in November.
Right.
And I only know Rodriguez because I heard that
He's the
he's
new owner
also
of
had
George's.
some controversies.
You only know him because of
Running Georges.
right.
Right.
No, he's
And I've never, I mean, I've never heard of Robert Burke. I mean, that doesn't mean anything
Right.
except, and Hamilton Suarez Rodriguez has got 94 votes.
Right. And this is Ward 1 and 2 combined. But it's nice to see these local ones come in. And again, Jubenville's running unopposed, and actually will run unopposed in November, I believe. I don't think there's anyone
Yeah,
unopposed.
that's true. And then, again, this is the governor's council thing. If you ask people, what does the governor's council do? The biggest thing, of course, is that they pass on the judges,
Right.
except the judges that are nominated by the governor.
They also approve of the notaries, of which I'm one. I've been a notary since
Oh, is that right?
1980.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of ceremonial things that they do.
There is a hot race up in the area around Watertown. There's one woman who's on the council, Marilyn Devaney Petito, who's considered to be a troublemaker. And so there's a race there at the caucus that I was
she
talking
causes a lot
about.
of trouble on the council.
Yeah, Jubenville came in, and I mentioned to him that I had taught in Watertown. I know Marilyn Devaney. I taught 3 of her children. And I told him that, and he said, "Oh, she's terrible." He was just telling me about this. But on the other hand, she is saying that all of the governor's council, because you don't know what they're doing, should be televised.
Yeah.
And she's the only one of the 8 of them, I think it's 8,
Yeah.
who wants it to be televised.
And you know what? And that's and one of the things, the point, and she said that, it's not that she wants to kind of shake things up, but also reveal so people can understand, because that council always gets a lot of flack. Like, what do we really need them? What do they do?
And this is the thing, right? I mean, debates, if we had principled candidates, they would debate, right? They wouldn't look at the polls to decide whether they were going to debate. We could use better debate structures, we could use better systems for having these conversations, but to opt out seems to me unprincipled. The same as transparency. We want more and more transparency. Otherwise, not only don't we know what's happening, but if we're going to get more people engaged, they have to know.
See, Deal, for example, has refused to debate Doty.
Right. But he's going to want to debate
He wants to
Maura
debate Maura
Healey.
Healey,
Right?
but what's in it for her, to debate against
That's
him,
right.
Because you
That's
get
absolutely
some
right.
unwinding crazy talk about, whether, Trump is still the president.
Well, this evening, Maura Healey will address the IBW, and in that meeting tonight,
The IBW, International
Brotherhood, yeah.
Of electrical workers.
Of
Yeah,
electrical
right,
workers, yeah. We just say IBW for short.
just for
Yeah.
folks at home who
Okay.
might
Oh,
not know.
yes. All right. And so I think, but what she's going to do, she'll probably lay out, a vision of what she hopes to achieve.
That's right.
Oh, Brady.
Okay. So here we go.
Yes.
But where is this?
This is wards 1 and 2, and certainly Brady's off to a pretty large lead.
Right.
And I don't think that would surprise us, given Ward 1 and 2 from are mostly Brockton. She's going to be stronger in some of the new parts of the district, right?
They did the redistricting, and there was a movement to have more majority-minority districts.
Right.
So in the case of the one that Rita Mendez and Shirley Azak, that is really heavily, it's over 70%.
Non-white.
Right. But of course, it's a question of who's registered to vote. They are only counting men, women, and children, right? And it's 46,000.
Right, because it only goes by population.
Right.
That's the other thing.
But we had, after the 2010 census, starting in 2012, for 10 years, we had a state reps district that was majority-minority. I live in that district, which has now gone away.
And this is Jim Gordon for
Jim
the
Gordon
state
will
Senate.
run against Brady. I'm assuming Brady's going to win. He will be the Republican
And again, this
candidate for that. But my point about the majority, it's a question of who goes out and votes.
Right.
That, for 10 years, that district has been represented first by Tom Kennedy, first by Brady and then by Jerry Cassidy.
Right.
Two white Irishmen in a majority-minority district by number of people.
Right.
But it doesn't say about what the voters are.
Yeah.
Now, in Brady's case, the African-American groups like the NAACP in the state wanted that district. It's been reconfigured.
Right.
And they wanted that to take in all of Randolph.
Right, it only took in part.
But it only took in half of Randolph, and Brady kept two, like Whitman and Hanson or something,
Right.
on to the east of us, sort of thing. And in the city, where people know him, in the city of Brockton, which is
Right.
the major part of this district, people know about him. They're not going to vote against him because he's a white guy.
Right.
Because they've seen him around. I mean, there was a joke, I was at a political event, and a state rep, this is when he was a state rep, Brady, state rep from Worcester said that Mike Brady will show up to anything, including the opening of an envelope.
Yeah.
And it was just like, he is around.
Yeah.
You know?
And it goes back to, I remember when we lived on Fenway Circle in Brockton, and there were only I only remember two candidates that ever went door to door that actually, while I was home.
Right.
And Mayor Units, who wore out many pairs of shoes,
Right.
and Mike Brady. But the other thing is the availability. When we do presentations at the Brockton Public Library on immigration, or you will always find Jerry Cassidy. You'll find Mike Brady, and if he can't come, he'll send a note or an email.
Right.
Sorry, I'm in so and so. So in terms of the work ethic, and the same with Claire. Wonderful. So one of the things I do when I'm doing a presentation, I don't invite them. But they come,
Right.
and I'll, and people will ask me, well, what do you think of our local delegation? And I have to tell them. I said they're responsive,
Now, think of the difference, though, of going door to door versus showing up at events. When you go door to door, you are trying to convince a lot of people that you wouldn't see at events, right? You're trying to talk to people who generally may not even be voters, right? If we go by percentages,
Right.
more than half of the people you talk to probably aren't voting. When you go to events, you're going out to a place where people are going. It means they're engaged in something.
Right, self-selected
Right?
group.
Exactly. And so if we go back to the original, issue of civic engagement, right? The more we engage people, particularly from a young age, as you suggested, talk about activism, and we can talk about activism on an ideological level or activism as simple, working in the community. But that level of engagement then increases the likelihood that people will vote. And that means that candidates then have to talk. Mm-hmm. They have to say something.
Yeah.
They have to do something. And this is really, to me anyway, if we're really going to talk about a crisis in democracy, it's not going to be solved on the national level simply by trying to ward off fascism. It's got to be solved on a local level by having people believe that what they are voting for is totally integrated into their everyday life.
See now, and this is now, for example, if you and I were teaching U.S. history, U.S. 1 and U.S. 2 today, and I agree exactly with what you're saying, and I would, in the past I would, have different speakers come in, but today I would have reps come in, and I would videotape. For example, Jerry Cassidy sits on the Joint Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion at the state level. Michelle Dubois on another, and I would have them explain to my students what does that committee do, What are your hopes? In other words, just so students could understand, you know, because it's just everything is so removed from them. Even when I took my students on a tour to the state, you know, you see the Golden Dome, you know, and yes, and John Hancock's mansion was near here and all that, you know. But it's they need to understand the workings, you know.
And the flip side is that our reps need to hear from more people, right? Because right now, as we're suggesting, very small turnout for voting. It's in the interest of many politicians not to accomplish things, not to have public debates, not to really engage the public as much as we might want them to. They need in some ways to be forced to do that. And by bringing more and more people out to events, by creating a kind of public mass of interest in political issues, we'll see in November, when there are a couple of really interesting ballot initiatives, who's going to come out.
Yeah, that can help.
Yeah.
I mean, Galvin's office has predicted that today there'd be 23% turnout in the state, which I think is pretty low.
Right.
But the state legislature scheduled it for the day after Labor Day.
Right.
And that's incumbent protection. The lower the turnout is, the more it favors incumbents. And the other thing, of course, the rain.
We're about to see one of the big races for the evening.
Look at that.
So this is Wards 1 and 2, really hot state representative race for a very new district. And we've only got 2 of the candidates up here. Rita Mendez is doing very, very well. We expect to see a few votes for Fred Fontaine at some point in the evening, as long as those stickers were able to stick to the ballot. But these are, you know, some of the real local numbers that we're seeing right now.
So 1 and 2, I can't remember all of 7. 1 and 2, all of 7. I live in Ward 3, but there's 4 precincts. 2 of them are in this district, and one of the ones that I live in is in Cassidy's district still. So it's really, I mean, I'm not sure who. It looks like gerrymandering. If you look at it's serpentine all over the city. This new district.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like. Even our ward maps, you know, we have the 7 wards, and it's the oddest thing.
Yeah, you look at it. In fact, in fact, all of our reps have a website, you know, for the state, and the maps for each district, the 9th, the 10th,
right?
They're mapped out, and today when I was talking to Mike Brady,
so numbers have changed slightly just since the last time.
Yeah.
Now maybe they see. This is only 1 and 2.
1 and 2A.
1 and 2A.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a
that's
great
close.
race. This is going to be a great race
Yeah.
for the night. I think that, you know, we want to kind of play up the excitement of a night like tonight for a race like this. This is, you know, one of the most important races of the evening for this community. But I think when we start talking about gerrymandering and thinking about how districting and gerrymandering has been used historically, even the notion that you're creating a very dense district that's, you know, we're using the term majority-minority, but certainly, you know, one of the reasons that those districts get created is to dilute that impact, you know, throughout the rest of the community. You can imagine that with the demographic shifts here in Brockton, that if in fact you had 100% turnout, that you would have a very different last decade of local politics. But the idea is, you know, between gerrymandering and between really disempowering a tremendous amount of the electorate, you're really going to continue to get very similar types of people in your city council.
I mean, there are, someone told me recently,
state reps.
55,000 registered voters in Brockton, which seems like an extraordinarily high number. I don't know if that's accurate. I didn't look that up. But you wonder when these people registered to vote. And in fact, because our state doesn't wash people if they don't vote for a while, those people, and I was on voter registration drives back when Obama was elected. So in 2008, people were just signing up to register so they could vote for Obama.
Yeah.
And maybe again in 2012, and then they voted for him, and they thought the work was done.
I'm glad you brought that up because, I know a lot of people who didn't vote for Obama. His phrase was, "Yes, we can," and these were African Americans that said, "Oh, no, you didn't." That was their response. And one of the things that bothered them was once he was in office, they felt that he should have capitalized on that moment. And earlier, with our breaks, we have as a commercial PSA these voting websites, and I want to tell you that we had some very effective voting websites and apps for young people. And after he was elected, they all dried up. And it was so sad I couldn't even use those for any of my students because so it was a season. And those things need to be permanent. Anything that's going to engage youth has to be permanent. And so those structures, if we're talking about, President Biden talked about democracy and the survival of democracy and it's in danger, you have to instill within the young people that this is important for you.
Don't forget that one of the incredible success stories of the Obama campaign was the ability to get grassroots organizers on board, right? And you had Marshall Gans from the Kennedy School at Harvard, teaching people how to organize.
Right.
And so all of those mechanisms and all of those grassroots community organizations that bought into this idea, there are a number of different articles about this. As soon as Obama was elected and Rahm Emanuel took over as chief of staff, those groups were gone.
Yeah.
They bought into the triangulation theory. They got rid of people like Van Jones. They got rid of the people who were seen to be too left ideologically. And what was left, of course, was the same old, Larry Summers and Geithner and a whole bunch of the, moderate to conservative Democrats who took a hard line on austerity and other things. And so when there were people who said, well, no, you didn't, well, of course, who was left?
Yeah.
When Roosevelt, here we go, we're getting some more numbers. So State Rep, Cassidy's running unelected, but this person, Mr. Cassidy, will be running against who? Is there even a Republican candidate for that district?
That's the race between Robert Burke and the fellow who runs Rodriguez.
Oh, and Rodriguez.
Yeah, Rodriguez.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a Republican primary to run against him.
Right.
He has no opponent
In the Democratic. Yeah. Right.
Right, in the Democratic. And particularly in, he's got a new district.
Right, well, there's...
That's right.
Wait a minute.
This is Larry Novak.
He's going to run against
Cassidy. He came out of the, oh my goodness, he goes way back.
But
those are a lot of zeros to have. I think that might be a little bit optimistic for the...
he is on the ballot.
He is on the ballot, yeah.
He's on the Republican ballot. Here he is right here.
Now, so here's a theoretical question that I want to ask, because these are the kinds of things that, people who are quantitative always ask me and I can't answer them. But will he be the Republican nominee if in fact he gets no votes?
Oh boy, I've been trying to talk to people. I have heard, and I don't know. He has to get at least his own, I think. I really don't know.
His name isn't on the ballot.
Yes, he is. It's underneath.
Yes, you can't.
It's under here. You can't see it in the sample.
Yeah.
It's up here. It's covered by the E.
You know,
Yeah, but there's no.
you know why? Because you have it's a different district,
Oh.
right? So
Right,
you know,
right. So,
Okay, I
yeah.
get you.
depending.
Yep, you're right. You're
Right.
right.
So depending on what district you're in, you
right.
may be in
You
Brockton.
got a different ballot.
Yeah,
Right.
different
So as
ballot.
you
Yeah.
suggested, there's Cassidy, there's the race with Brady, and then there's the one that's really contested, which is ASEC and
Right,
and Mendez.
So now you're.
And you wonder how many votes Fred's sticker candidacy is going to take away. I mean, the people that voted for him, who would they have voted for in
If he
the
wasn't-
absence,
right.
if he
If,
wasn't
if
there?
that's a significant
And there's,
difference,
there's
yeah.
no way to tell that. But the thing is, I talked to Fred today outside of South Junior High.
Did he give you a sticker?
No, no, I don't live, I didn't live in that district, but, you know, I was talking to him, and he says that his signs that his followers are holding, saying that they should vote for him with a sticker in both September and November. So I said, today you're running in the Democratic primary, right? And he said, yes. And I said, then you're going to run again in November as an independent? And he said, yes. And I don't know what the rules are. This is the first time I've encountered this. So I did call the former registrar of voting in Brockton, and he didn't know about it either. I have no idea what the rules on this. Can
Right.
you lose and then run again in the same year? I don't know.
Yeah.
But apparently, if people put
We'll find
stickers
out.
on there,
I assume we'll find out. But I, you know, that does get back to, you know, some of the disillusionment I imagine people feel with this with this kind of electoral political system. You know, I'm impressed by many of the candidates tonight who are running, and even though they might be hundreds of votes behind just in the small amount we've gotten back so far, my guess is that they're also running for the future. They're running to have their name out there. They're running to get the experience they need. They're running to put together, you know, who are my allies here? Who are my supporters? And sometimes they're running for positions. You know, somebody does really well, and they may not win, but you know,
Somebody might offer them a position.
I'm thinking, you know, when someone like Sonia Chang Diaz is running as well as she is, even though she's dropped out,
that's right.
she's clearly got support around the state. She might be likely to run for another office. She might be likely to be appointed to a certain position. Shows a lot of grace on Maura Healey's part, perhaps. But there's so many different reasons why someone might do that. I'm not sure I get that from the Fred Fontaine sticker campaign. It feels to me more like merchandising. It feels to me like more like it's just this constant getting the name out into the public. And hoping that, you know, the spaghetti sticks to the wall somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what his motivations are, and I have theories, but those are not appropriate for this time. You know, they're not, yeah. But it is notable that a lot of the people who are running, if they, the rule is that you can only run for one office at a time. Right. So Sonia Chang Diaz, Tammy Govey, Eric Lesser, they're all going to lose their current jobs.
Yeah.
By not running for those offices again.
In November, right.
Kim Driscoll is a mayor, so she was allowed to continue. And Shirley and Rita, neither one of them will lose their city council positions by doing this because it's at a different time. But some of the people are giving up. I'm not sure how good a job it is to be a state senator, but some of the people, no, I mean, they must not think it's great. Right. They might have something better to do.
Yeah.
I think Quentin Palfrey, I really like him. You know, he was Assistant Attorney General under Martha Coakley.
Right.
And so he could, you know, he has experience. He came and then endorsed Andrea Campbell,
Right.
it's possible that he
Sure,
could
there's
work
something.
in her office. It's possible,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
So we are going to go to another short break, I'm guessing that over the next, over the next 15 minutes to a half hour, we're going to start to see a lot of different numbers come in, and we'll see if trends that are starting now will continue. So thank you very much for being here this evening. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
This is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making. This is history in the making. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Feel like sun on my skin. This is love. I know it is. I know it sounds super cliche, but you make me feel some type of way. This is falling, falling in love.
Why aren't you voting?
When you vote, you can do something about everything. At voteforyourlife.com, it's never been faster or easier to make a plan to vote.
Time is running out, but you still have the chance to use your power.
Check your registration and make sure your address on file is correct.
Find your state's deadlines, learn about local candidates, and request a ballot.
You'll be able to see where candidates stand on issues you care about.
Order a ballot request form to be mailed to you with prepaid postage.
Allowing you to vote early, easily, and safely.
Make a plan to vote early by finding your nearest ballot drop box, in-person polling place, or local mailbox.
And this is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
This is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making. This is history in the making. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Feel like sun on my skin. This is love. I know it is. I know it sounds super cliche, but you make me feel some type of way. This is falling, falling in love.
Why aren't you voting?
When you vote, you can do something about everything. At voteforyourlife.com, it's never been faster or easier to make a plan to vote.
Time is running out, but you still have the chance to use your power.
Check your registration and make sure your address on file is correct.
Find your state's deadlines, learn about local candidates, and request a ballot.
You'll be able to see where candidates stand on issues you care about.
Order a ballot request form to be mailed to you with prepaid postage.
Allowing you to vote early, easily, and safely.
Make a plan to vote early by finding your nearest ballot drop box, in-person polling place, or local mailbox.
And this is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
Welcome back to our coverage of primary night here in Massachusetts. My name is Corey Dolgon. I'm a professor of sociology at Stonehill College, and with me tonight are Willie Wilson Jr. and Steve Thomasy. And we have been having, I think, some incredible conversation, but the point of the evening is really to be bringing you some of the results. And so we're very excited that we're going to have some more results coming in very soon. As we wait a few more moments for those numbers. Oh wait, here we go. So I'm assuming that we're still looking primarily at wards 1 and 2. And we can see again that Moore Healy is quite far ahead of Sonia Chang Diaz, which we would have expected since Diaz had dropped out. Again, Deal, who is the Trump-backed candidate from the Republican Party to run against probably Maura Healey, is leading Chris Doughty, who is the Governor Baker-backed candidate for the Republicans. In the lieutenant governor race, Kim Driscoll is quite a bit ahead of her opponents. I think, Steve, you had a great analysis of that both Gouvier and Lesser were seen primarily as progressive, whereas Driscoll had self-identified as a moderate. And you can see that the progressive vote is pretty much being divided equally. As far as the Republican lieutenant governor race, I think, again, as you suggested, the Deal ticket of Allen and Deal, Allen is pretty much the same amount ahead of Campanelli as Deal is ahead, although Campanelli may have a few more votes than the gubernatorial candidate. And here we are with the Attorney General race for Democrats. This is one of the hotly contested campaigns of the evening, and we can see Andrea Joy Campbell is comfortably ahead of Shannon Liss-Riordan. Again, this is local Brockton numbers. I don't know if we'll see any state numbers tonight. So really we're giving you kind of where Brockton stands statewide. We did start to get some really interesting numbers right before the break for some of the local elections, and we'll get back to them. Here again is the Secretary of State, and Galvin is comfortably ahead, about 2-1, of Tanisha Sullivan. Sullivan will probably run even more strongly here than elsewhere because this is her hometown.
And again, her father is a retired Boston public school teacher. And so again, the connection, people make in terms of,
Sure,
because that they do ask, what, where is this person coming from? Yeah.
Right. Deborah Goldberg, so here's the fascinating thing, right? She's running unopposed. I don't think she's opposed by the Republicans either in November. We assume that as a treasurer, she's done a decent job and there aren't any scandals. But I'm always really interested in why only 500 people actually voted for her when clearly we have almost 2,000 votes total from the wards.
Because they see, a lot of people won't, because it's unopposed, they won't bubble.
They won't even bother. DeZoglio is slightly ahead of Dempsey here in Brockton. But again, we'll see statewide what those numbers look like later tonight or tomorrow morning in the Enterprise or the Globe. And Amore will be their opponent in
I love that
November.
last name, Amore.
Yeah, he definitely looks like more of a lover than a fighter. Sorry, Anthony.
No, it's okay.
And Stephen Lynch is running unopposed for the Democratic seat. And his opponent, well, it's still early. Robert Burke is ahead of Hamilton Rodriguez. We haven't seen much movement in that race since earlier this evening. Jubenville is running unopposed. Right, yes. Jubenville is running unopposed in November as well.
You want to remind them that this is just
These
Brockton.
are all
It's 1 and
Brockton
2.
numbers right now. We're primarily Ward 1 and 2. No, we won't see statewide numbers here tonight, but of course will be available tomorrow. Michael Brady is leading Katrina Huff-Larmond, again, quite comfortably. These are mostly Brockton wards, so we might not see the bulk of her support, which I assume would be from Randolph, which is where she's from. But I don't know that would be enough to overcome Brady. And Jim Gordon now has 308, and he will be running against Brady or Larmond. Cassidy again running unopposed. And he was running against a Republican who had no votes before, and according to our tallies, still has no votes. So it's too late to get out there and vote for Novak. But I guess according to this,
now how come Michelle didn't have any votes?
maybe it's
She's running
we're just
unopposed?
not. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
not
maybe
getting
they
a tally.
don't, they're not.
So this is I think the
But
hot
this
race of
has
the evening.
been the same number. I mean, we're talking about we're going on 10 and the polls have been closed
For 2
for
hours.
2 hours. Now, I know that the new ways of voting, the mail-in ballots
Right.
and the early voting ballots, even you would think that would expedite the process.
Because they were counted
But
earlier
in fact,
today.
they couldn't be counted until this morning.
Right.
And so that has slowed up the process.
That's interesting.
In the old days, before they had these alternative ways, the vote,
That's right. Once they
the
were
numbers
done.
would come in
That's
right
right.
away, and campaigns would actually get the numbers almost immediately because
Now, this is a big number, and it's interesting.
Wow.
We were talking about county commissioner before.
yeah.
Tell us about the
Well,
candidates.
this is the Democratic primary.
Correct.
So Carlos de Silva actually is from, actually I know both of these guys, but Carlos de Silva is from Hingham, and he's a school committee member. This is his 4th time, I believe, running for county commissioner. He's pretty dogged, and he comes to Brockton an awful lot.
Who's this?
Carlos
de Silva.
And these numbers are
Alex
actually
Bezanson is in Abington, right across his office for his business. I think he's in construction. Is right across the Brockton line. You know, if you go from Brockton to Abington, you go through that.
123.
Yeah, you go through that swampy area,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then he has a building there. And I went to his office once because he was supporting Michelle Dubois, and when she was she had a credible opponent at one point. Tim Cruz's brother, John Cruz, was running against her. Anyway, so I'm really. Alex Bezanson has run for the office also before.
I will say Joe McDonald is also running unopposed, and I believe is unopposed in November.
That's right.
As well, there's no Democratic
Right,
candidate.
and it's an interesting thing. Now, yesterday, I got an email from a woman named Cecilia Nolan, never heard of her, and she said, I know you haven't heard of me, I am the Democratic Town Committee head for Hull, which is also apparently in Plymouth County. And she suggested that you could write in the name of a man named Chris Diorio. And if you write in, see what the advantage of the sticker is that it has
need
the
the address.
person's address already on it. If you do a write-in, you can't just write in the name.
You have to write in
You
the
also
address.
have to write in their address. So I did that today, and she claims in this email that if this guy gets 1,000 votes throughout the county today, write-in votes, that he'll be on the November ballot against McDonald. Now, she only sent this to me yesterday, so I couldn't even tell anybody about it, except for my wife, who thought it was a scam. But anyway.
Yeah, I voted for a Nigerian prince this morning, but I didn't have the address.
But it was just an odd sort of thing. And the sheriff seems like a fairly important role. And to have nobody, and Joe McDonald's been the sheriff as long as I can remember. I don't know who was before him.
Well, and that's why it'll be really fascinating in November to see the district attorney race. I think that Cruz has been DA for at least almost 2 decades, at least a decade and a half, and I think Mr. Hall is probably the first really credible candidate in a while to go up against.
That's true.
So that'll be a fascinating race for November. But I think we're getting most of the wards in now, and hopefully we'll have some new numbers soon. I have to say that obviously, given our task at hand tonight, the speed with which the numbers come in is crucial, because we have to talk.
Well,
but I just want to say, when it comes to democracy, the speed that the numbers come in is not necessarily the biggest issue. It looks like Sandra Wright, for county commissioner.
On the Republican
side. And of course, Cruz won. We're back to the county commissioner numbers. Right, so Sandra Wright would be running against either Besançon or De Silva.
Yeah.
And those are some hefty numbers. So we are getting some good numbers from that. Now, how much of Plymouth County is Brockton? In other words, the Brockton numbers.
Entirely.
Right, but there would be numbers for. Would they be representing just the Brockton area on the county commission?
No, the county includes, Brockton's the only city in Plymouth County, but all the other towns would be included.
So there are a lot of numbers that we wouldn't see.
Right, you
just
can't see.
reporting on Brockton.
You can't see East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater. You can't see Middleborough.
Right. So that election could be a lot closer than we think.
And those will
I'm
come
just
in.
a little frustrated because I would think that we would have numbers for the Mendez-Azek
from
race,
around the city,
and also for the Brady race.
Right.
Because those are all, well, the Brady isn't entirely in the city. I can tell you, and it must be because of the new ways of voting. Back in the election where Bill Carpenter beat Linda Balzotti.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was just by a few votes too.
Right. But I was in what's it called, the Asian restaurant on the south side that's kind of closed. It's a big deal. What's the name of it? On the south side, on South Main Street.
Oh, I know what you mean. I know it.
But it's a.
Someone will call in.
It was
with
but it was
name
a
of the
big.
restaurant.
It was a big deal restaurant, and recently it's been closed. But there were a lot of political events used to be held there, and on the night of that election, I was down there because Linda Balzotti's campaign was having their victory night thing, and in the main dining room part. A speaker from her campaign was saying, "Oh, it looks like the numbers are coming in, and we're going to win this election." Everybody was cheering, and so I went out and I sat at the bar and I was watching literally the same show as Mark Lindy and Steve Foote and stuff like this, and they were reading, and this is maybe 8:30, about a half hour after the thing. They're reading the ward numbers as they're coming in. And Carpenter has a few more in Ward 3, a few more in Ward 6, a few more in like this.
Sure.
And it was only a few more in each one. And the people in Balzotti's, you guys don't know the name of that restaurant on the side. It's going to kill me because everybody used to go there. It was a big deal.
You know, the
But anyway-
tens of people in the audience are all
But it was
shouting
like-
it out, and we
Right,
just can't hear
right,
them.
and we can't hear it. Whatever it was, but the point is that it was like by 8:30, 8:45, it was clear that Carpenter
Yeah.
had won narrowly, but the numbers had come in very quickly. And before they had all those things, you used to go, if you were working for a candidate, as soon as
Yeah,
the
sure.
numbers come in, they post it. And
Right.
you could go, like my wife and I would go to like 4 precincts and pull the numbers off and then call them into the
Right.
candidate that we were supporting so that by 9 o'clock you knew
Right.
who won these
Sure.
things. So I'm wondering why it is we're not getting numbers from Brockton.
Yeah.
Why do we only get 1 and 2 or something like that?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I wonder how much has
Yeah.
to do with the fact that these things are changing, right? I mean, we know that Massachusetts hasn't had the kind of problems that they've had in other states, particularly, you know, the kind of red states that went blue that are claiming fraud. But, you know, it does seem to me that fewer and fewer people are also engaging in the process of elections themselves.
Right.
So I wonder if they also have fewer people counting, you know, at a time when they need more people. If you think about it,
And-
they need
and-
more people because of the diversity of how you vote.
Right, and one
Right.
of the things that
The Maui.
the
Maui, that's
thank
it,
you.
Maui.
I was going to say, who's Maui and what
Yeah,
position
yeah,
are
the
they
Maui,
running
the
for?
Maui restaurant. Yeah,
Maui.
I love the food. Yeah.
Right.
Now, the other thing when you talked about that, this is one of the things that Bill Galvin does. You know, so when some of the other states were pioneering, you know, mail in and all, and his office would study. You know, they would contact other states. Well, how are you doing this? And he's very meticulous about,
Right.
you know, before you put something into place. And like, for example, the issue that happened today in Barnstable, you know, I don't know if you were aware.
No.
What happened is some of the ballots couldn't get out, or they were in a vault.
Humidity.
And they couldn't open the vault, so they had to go to paper, and so they had to extend beyond the 8 o'clock. He was down there, and so, you know, but he always, you know, when these new initiatives, so he just doesn't throw something out there. He really researches and examines.
You're
Well,
gonna
he
be
has
very
already
complimented.
said that he will not run after the next presidential election, that he wants to be in office to
For
sort of make
2024.
sure that everything's
Right.
kosher
Right.
during the next presidential election, and then he won't run beyond that.
Yeah.
So
now the
that's-
good news,
yes.
the good news, especially for folks out who are watching, is that all the wards are about to come in. So we are hopefully just a few moments away from that.
Right.
We can see a slight change here. Bezenson has increased his lead
Besançon.
slightly.
Besançon.
Bezenson, sorry, thank
Yeah.
you. But we should be getting some
It'll
some
be
more local
interesting
city
to see
stuff.
that if they do give us the numbers from all wards, will they include the number of stickers that were put on for Fred?
Right.
If they're there, yeah.
Well, but I mean, those are countable. They're on there
Sure,
or
sure.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My guess is if they're substantive, yes. They're all in. Okay, so the numbers are all in. We're getting some other numbers we hadn't seen before for
good,
district
good,
attorney. So, you know, Rasan Hall has gotten 5,500 votes. So there are a lot of votes that have come in now, and we're going to see some big totals. This is very surprising, I think, from what was a very close race. Rita Mendez looks to have really extended her lead to quite a large number.
Right. It's more than 2-1 at the
yeah.
moment. Right.
Yeah, so there are Michelle Du Bois votes you were looking for earlier.
Yeah, they are. And see, they were just coming in.
They were just
Yeah,
coming in. Sure. So I don't know if these
Oh,
are going to be...
Larry's got 390.
He's got 390. So he will qualify for the ballot in November. I'm sure the
Yeah.
Novak folks
I remember
are
when
very
he was
happy.
a school committee person, and those were some interesting times.
So Mr. Cassidy is 1,408. And actually, well, that's a substantial amount for Jim Gordon. I don't know if that's a district that could ever go Republican, but perhaps.
Well, look at though, the Democrats
Yeah.
have so many more votes than
Yeah.
combined.
So Brady has a really comfortable lead, and even if Huff-Larmond picks up votes in Randolph that we're not necessarily seeing, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah,
To catch Brady. So that's a pretty comfortable seat for him. But
Again, hard, work.
oh yeah.
Work ethic,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so we can see now we've got about 5,300 votes.
5,239.
Right, and that's someone who's running unopposed. So we really are seeing much bigger vote totals now. They all kind of came in at once.
Okay, now Robert G. Burke with
Right.
1123.
So Burke will be running against Lynch
Right,
come November.
right. Again, Congressman Lynch always delivering.
Right, and of course, that district goes up into South Boston.
Right.
No, he's my congressman too up in Milton.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
My niece, my cousin rather, works for him, Shayna Barnes.
Now this is
Oh,
interesting. It does look like DeZolio is going to at least win this area's endorsement. But we're looking at a statewide race, so we'll find out in the morning.
Find out. I think, statewide, I'm thinking Christopher will pick up more.
Pick up, and Deborah Goldberg has now gotten over 5,000 votes, which means that people are voting for all of the ballot candidates,
yeah.
not just the ones where there's a race. That's good news. People are
And
engaged.
again, good reputation about her,
Yeah.
in terms of her office.
So for Republican, Rayla Campbell is running unopposed, but it'll be interesting to see what the number is for the Democrats. And there we go. It looks like Bill Galvin's comfortably ahead, and I imagine he will remain so. But, it's not a bad showing. It is Sullivan's hometown, but, again, we talked about what does it mean to lose an election, but to run a good campaign. She's quite young. This was her first statewide campaign, I think. So I think we'll see a lot more of Tanisha Sullivan. And I'm sure the Brockton folks will be cheering her on.
Right, she was out here for the Juneteenth celebration at City Hall.
Yep.
But I mean, if you think about all the candidates that we're looking at for the state primary, the only one from Western Massachusetts for any
Right.
of the
Lesser.
statewide offices is Eric Lesser.
Yeah.
Okay.
who
So
is
it looks like
1445. Oh, okay.
now that's interesting. He is running unopposed, and there's not a lot on the Republican primary ballot.
Right.
But the fact that Hall has over 5,000, 5,500 votes.
But see, this is
bodes
only
well.
Brockton numbers, right?
No, that's right. That's
And
right.
he lives in Brockton.
Say Cruz, because they don't have a slide.
So we don't have a slide for Cruz. So Tim Cruz has gotten 1,445
In
votes
the Republican
in the Republican
primary
primary.
to
District
hold his
attorney.
own.
Right.
Yeah.
He's
current
running
position.
unopposed, but right, and it is just Brockton, not all of Plymouth County. Plymouth County will probably come in the November election a little bit more towards Cruz, but it's going to be a tight. I think that's going to be a tight race in
Me too.
November.
Boy, this is
James McMahon
Yeah,
III,
yeah.
1366.
maybe the same. I mean, I suspect the same people who are voting for Cruz are voting for him.
Okay, Andrea Campbell at 3,789, and Shannon Liss-Riordan 2,080.
Yeah.
And again, Quentin Palfrey, who withdrew, he has
Yeah.
786.
And there's no way to
Where-
take
where
your
they-
name off.
Right,
you
right.
know?
Yeah, so it'll be interesting when we do get the state numbers tomorrow. But I'm really fascinated by some of these numbers, and I'll be really interested to see where these Brockton totals come in when it comes to the state, just to see.
Right.
In that
and
last,
I- and-
in that last one, before this one, for
The Democrat.
for the lieutenant governor, Govey and Lesser's numbers were only a few short, right?
Well, actually, together now they're over Driscoll,
Over-
but
yeah, well, right. No, they're not. They're 3,000.
if you combine them,
No,
Oh,
they're-
you're
it's
right, 3,000,
but
sorry,
close.
yeah.
Very, it's much closer, and this is just a divided vote.
yeah, that'll be
for the
interesting if it's
progressives.
statewide too.
What I also like when the results come in, and I love this, the Globe will actually do a breakdown
Yeah.
Right.
of communities.
Yeah.
So you can see,
Right.
within Plymouth County,
Sure.
which the way each town, Brockton's the only city, but how the towns voted
Right.
as well.
Yeah, and here again, deal, the Trump-backed deal beating the Baker-backed Dowdy. I'm sure that Trump will chalk this one up again to his endorsement, but it is pretty interesting. His numbers around the country have remained pretty stable as far as who he's supporting and who wins. And Maura Healey comfortably ahead. But again, to be doing as well as Diaz is to have dropped out of the race, I'm not sure if it says a lot for voters being cognizant of that fact, but
Right,
again, it's a good
right.
showing.
It's a very good showing.
I was surprised to see her name on there because she dropped out in June.
Right.
They couldn't get it off in time, huh?
Well, I think that once you're qualified and on the ballot, you can't be removed.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, we're probably getting towards all the numbers being in, and they're all in. So I don't know if we can get one last look. I mean, I think some of the hot races would be interesting, especially the state rep race, if we can get those numbers up again for Mendez and Asik.
Because it looks like the Mike Brady race, he's got a significant
Yeah, I
lead.
don't think that's going to be different. But the
But
state rep,
The state rep one is the most interesting. That's the only one that's entirely in Brockton.
right? So these numbers will
Right.
probably be final numbers, and Mendez was significantly ahead. Yeah.
Now here it is.
I think that this race is done. I think it looks
Yeah,
like Rita
well,
Mendez.
Except that
The number
has
seems
to
low.
be only a small portion of the numbers. I mean,
Well, I mean those numbers
Are
total.
those reflecting all of the
Supposedly
precincts?
all the
wards and
precincts.
precincts are in.
You know why? But that state. Don't forget that state rep district is. There are 3 different districts, right?
right.
And,
So-
and they're not on. Here's the thing, for example, because they're not in mine. So you know how these are customized
Right.
to
For the
ward
district.
in
Yeah.
specific
That's right.
precincts.
That
so
may
like
be the
that,
total.
That I can see that. you
Yeah,
know.
that might be the final
You're
total.
thinking the entire city, but
No,
it's
I
only.
understand
yeah.
that, but there's, I believe, yes, thank you. I believe there's 46,000 people in that newly created district. Now, that's men, women, and children, people
right.
who are not citizens, not registered, et
Right.
cetera. But it's got to be a low turnout.
Oh,
I
no,
know
that's
it's-
a low. Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, that the census. Getting
Right.
back to the census, it includes that block of children and so forth. Who cannot vote.
Okay, so I think you should have the final word here if we're.
Well, I'm
doing
not
a
sure
wrap.
why I get the final word,
Chris,
except
you're
Well,
the-
you're the moderator.
Moderator.
because I'm the best looking. First of all, I want to thank all the folks here who have really made the night possible. And so, once again, a great round of applause, and also a great
That's to Thomas and Ben and
Thomas
Athena.
and Athena, and of course Scott in the control room, who's been eating all night and who I can see through the window chewing. And so we'll have a few
I
words
think
later.
it's the steak and cheese.
So I want to thank everybody here, and everybody who tunes into things like this, and hopefully part of our increased engagement will be more and more people getting engaged with these kinds of events. Personally, I want to thank Willie and Steve. I have learned so much from you from our breakfast this morning through tonight. To me, it's a great inspiration to see people who are so engaged in their communities, so knowledgeable. You may have been self-deprecating a bit when you called yourself a politics junkie. It's politics junkies like you who really keep these machines running, if they're at all accountable to people in a particularly accountable way. So thank you, Willie. Thank you for being a good friend all these years. We're going to say goodnight.
And there's a much bigger election in November. People who are watching this, make sure you got plans for that day.
That's right. Plan your vote.
Right. The schools are closed that day. Willie and I know, well, actually, we have teacher programs. We have to go to workshops, but the schools are closed, so it'll be easier parking.
Sure. Thank you all very much. We'll say good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.